This is about a day that happened in school for me. Perhaps I was in a high school, I guess, or somewhere there. And the topic of discussion was human evolution, right? When you're talking of human evolution, you essentially look at how humans evolved from being primates into human beings and thereafter evolved to be the strongest species on planet Earth. But what caught my attention was not that. What caught my attention then was the mention of the word cockroaches. Anybody scared of cockroaches here? Quite a few. So, it was the mention of cockroaches and the fact that about cockroaches that was very insightful for me, right? Cockroaches have been part of this evolution for about 250 to 300 billion years, right? And the fascinating fact about that is that they have remained the same even now. So if you can get hold of a cockroach today and look at its ancestor about 300 million years ago, it'll be very, very similar. Just contrast that to human beings. Human beings have been around for about 100,000 to 150,000 years. And look where we are today, right? We are a very evolved species. We're dominating the world today. And this contrast was what actually caught my attention. Look, there is this cockroach that has been like what it is for this many years. And here's a human being who's evolved. And the thought process was, can we evolve faster? Can I contribute to that? That was my timid mind at that point of time, right? Then there was this discussion around Gregor Mendel and his experimentation with pea plants. You remember all of that? Anybody? About how dominance and inheritance happens, the law of inheritance and stuff like that, which talked about how genes work, what's dominant, how do you get a principal characteristic from generation to generation. And at that point of time, I strongly believed that I could do something to change this world and accelerate evolution of mankind. And I even thought of a word for that. If you look at biology then, every species is named after two words. It's called binomial nomenclature, right? So, and humans are called Homo sapiens. And I said, the evolved person will be an Homo sapien. The picture that I had in mind was perhaps out of movies where the next generation human beings had large heads, small thin legs, almost hairless. And I was somehow like that at that point of time. And I thought I was that Homo sapien, right? And that was the evolution that was there. And the closest I got to that was during COVID days when I was at home and I was a Homo sapien. That was where it all ended. But cut through to this entire intriguingness that was there with me, right? In terms of how could there be a species that has evolved so quickly? How could there be one which has just remained as it is? And that kept bothering my mind in terms of what should I do? Is there any way that I could do that? Charles Darwin has very clearly said, right, who survives, it's not the strongest, it's not the most intellect, but it is the one that's most adaptable that's going to survive. And, I was looking at ways and means of figuring out how I could accelerate that thing. And, no answers at that point of time. School passed, I got into professional course. I started to become a civil engineer. And civil engineer in the 90s was like a big taboo. Anybody who's wanting to get into civil engineering was perhaps the most stupid person who wanted to become an engineer, right? Everyone said, civil engineer? Not possible. But that's what I got in terms of what it is. So I joined that course, but somewhere this bug was always with me saying, should I be doing something differently? Should I be doing something differently? So at that point of time, this entire irritant that was in my brain had to take some kind of shape. So I was looking at what could be the possible ways of me trying to better myself from Homo sapien to Homo sapien. That was the entire quest. So I thought through, and one of the things that came to mind to me at that point of time was this mantra, which has stuck with me till life today, right? It's what I call as staying relevant, right? Staying relevant, you understand, is your ability to basically, at that point of time, my definition of staying relevant was this, to be self-aware, to know what you are, what is it that you have, what is your potential, how can you scale that potential and stuff like that. The second was to figure out your surrounding and figure out where you stand in the context of your surroundings. It could be competition, it could be the people with whom you work with, it could be anything and everything. And the third point was your ability to take a calculated risk or a calculated decision. I was thinking these are the 3 points under which I can define myself to be staying relevant. Right? So this was that eureka moment for me. This was the moment I thought, look, with these 3 principles, I'll head ahead. And as if to say, I had to experiment that. My first destiny of implementing a staying relevant move happened when I was in engineering only. I then decided to move from civil engineering, when I had done almost 1/3 of my course, into electrical engineering, which was the better of the two that way. Electrical engineering is the toughest engineering, as people say, but I took that bold move and moved on to that. And that happened to be my first movement of staying relevant. Right? So in Bangalore, and when we finished my electrical engineering after 4 years, things had changed topsy-turvy. It was all about computers. It was all about, a lot of these computer courses that everyone had to do. If you were in the city, you would realize that every nook and corner had a training institute, and everyone was doing some course or the other around computer science. So that was again a move where, you had to stay relevant. The entire paradigm shift had happened. You had to kind of adopt to that again. So what I did was, did a small course in a big college, and then moved on to get my first job, which was in a software company to sell CAD/CAM software. Right? It was a privately held company, and obviously when you're looking at people who have done better than you, this is a kind of a compromise, right? In terms of getting to a small role there. So the work continued. From there on, I moved on to a largely held, large IT company, which is known across India as well. Stayed there for 5 years. Then moved on to, my current organization, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And that was an organization which we all kind of looked up on, because they had set up their software bases in Bangalore in the 1985s. So it was almost religion for many of the guys who were in the computer field to work for this organization. It was one of those first MNCs to set shop in the country. So, there I got into that, but not as a technology person. I went into a sales role, managed sales for South of India, managed sales. So then moved into a little bit of technology, into product management. Product management is whatever product you get into the market space, you kind of work around it. What is the needs of the customer and try and marry that to the product. So I went to become a product manager for the country. Then I became a product manager for APJ. APJ is Asia Pacific and Japan. And what happened in all of this was I lost my philosophy of staying relevant, right? I somehow became very, I told you, right, it was a dream-felt job for me, and if I was going there and doing and finding progress, I somehow lost touch with what needed to happen. So eventually, at around 2016, I had to kind of move out of HPE. And there again, staying relevant became a very important thing for me, right? How do I stay relevant? How do I get it back again? So the point I want to make here is that staying relevant is not a point-in-time copy. It's not at one instance. It needs to happen continuously, and you have to be committed to it to ensure that you're always staying relevant. You perhaps have to question status quo. You'll have to figure out whether what you're doing is right, what you're doing is in line with what you would want to do. Is this in line with the industry? So several questions need to be asked. And the term that you can also look at is how consciously you do that. Many a times you're so comfortable in the job roles that you're doing, in the courses that you're doing, it's just not good enough for you to kind of look at it from a different angle. So that's what happened. I had to then take a serious step, and I moved from being very comfortable with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise then into a startup organization, US-based startup organization, and eventually into a market research firm. So it was a sea change in terms of being relevant. What was the motivation for all of this? I wanted to be relevant, and I had to move stream to stream. And it was an uphill task for somebody who was so technically inclined to become a market researcher. But that's what I did. And that gave me a different perspective. That gave me a different perspective in terms of looking at the world a little more bigger, looking at the world from a different angle, right? So this was staying relevant as a context for me. And what is staying relevant? And what is the purpose of staying relevant? The purpose of staying relevant was to be successful, right? Everyone wants to be very, very successful. So what is success? So that's got a definition across the board, right? And to me, when I was young, there was this proverb from Upanishads called Sarve Janaha Sukhino Bhavantu, which means for the peace of everyone, for the good of everyone. So for a person who had a belief in that, here I was wanting to excel myself. It was so individualistic, right? There's that large goal of saying everyone has to be good. There's this goal of saying I want to be good as well. So how do you manage this? I had a conflict again on that front in terms of what it is. The conclusion I reached was, look, if I am good, then I can do good for others as well. What do you hear when you go in an aircraft? Pehle apna seat belt pehen lo and baad mein dusra ko karo. It is like that. I wanted to ensure that I am on this fast track to evolution. I am then will be able to do that activity for others, right? So with that in mind, I started moving ahead. And some of the things that came to mind when I wanted to define what staying relevant was things that, as I said, to look at what you are doing at this point of time. One of the things that I feel is important is for everyone is to look ahead and be a futurist. Think large, think big is what they say, right? Think about what can be done. If people had not dreamt about things which are as wild as dreams, nothing would have concocted in this world. Nothing would have got invented in this world. So thinking big becomes very, very important. And the second thing is about how do you ensure that you connect all of the dots? The world is full of designs, various designs and patterns. Our ability to look into these designs and patterns is very important. If you don't look at these designs and patterns, you'll not be in a position to figure out what it is, right? So you have to look at all of these patterns and ensure that you're connected to that. Perhaps a bet to say, okay, look, here's a technology investment that I want to do. Here is one area of expertise that I'm going to excel in. These are the things that actually formulate of staying relevant. Is there a real need for people to be relevant? What do you think are the benefits of staying relevant? That's again a question. To me, one of the strongest benefits of being relevant is actually being proactive, right? Most of us are very, very reactive in the way we look at things. And if you are looking at today's world and today's technology, you can't be like that. Take artificial intelligence for as an example, right? I kind of speak every day on artificial intelligence. And one of the things this technology brings to table is it democratizes everything you know. There's no difference between X and Y. You have the same tools. You have the same skill sets that are available. The application of that only matters, right? And technology is such a thing that it accelerates whatever we are trying to do. You will find that any organization wants to leapfrog, any country wants to leapfrog or pole vault with the help of technology today. So I strongly believe that technology is one aspect that's going to change our lives significantly. Fortunate are we because we're going to dabble with a technology like artificial intelligence. 100 years from now, people would say, oh, this is the technology. This is the set of people who dabbled with this technology. That's what this paradigm shift can do. And when you're talking of that being so fast, you need to keep pace with that, right? If you think the world is fastest today, in the context of tomorrow, it is the slowest. Right? You think I'm running today. But if you look at tomorrow, it's perhaps, I just ran there at this speed. That's what it is. So that's the context. If you're looking at pace, you will have to be very, very relevant. Then you have to look at handling this. The second important thing that I figure out of staying relevant is that you can do time travel. You can look at what happened yesterday and why did I make a decision? What can I do tomorrow and why should I make a decision? So the ability to time travel by staying relevant is something that it brings to the table. It also helps in in disciplining, right? Discipline is freedom, as they say. If you're disciplined, you get a lot of freedom. If you've done your chores in the morning, then it's much more easier. You can know how to spend the time. So that's what staying relevant also brings to table. I think it also allows you to make your decisions very, very quickly. Because you're anticipating, like, there are algorithms in computer science which anticipate and get things, right? You're going into a website, it anticipates that you're going to buy this, and the next time you find those things fed into you. So this is the proactive nature of, or staying relevant nature that comes to the table. So with this, and another attribute that I added yesterday for this staying relevant framework, which was your ability to take feedback, is also very important. Ask for feedback and get that incorporated into your staying relevant framework. So that's what is my experiential story around how you can accelerate. This all starts from evolution to trying to be better evolved. And one of the mantras that I thought is very relevant is to stay relevant. So you should be looking at every activity that you do in a way and fashion that you feel that there is relevancy to it, right? It's a nice point-in-time copy that you can take. It's a nice attribute for one to really follow through. With that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.